Bakare-Yusuf.
Welcome back to Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders. We come back from Yemen. We traveled to Yemen with my first guest. Now we're coming back home. Indeed, we're not home. My second guest is not physically here, but he is joining us via Zoom. We will be exploring a different kind of frontline, not the battlefield, but the cultural commons where art, memory, and resistance collide. Gaza is burning under siege. What genocide scholars call a famine in plain sight. And yet, the struggle is not only fought with rockets or in courtrooms, but in poems, paintings, and public spaces. Those public spaces dare to tell the truth. My guest today, right now, is Andy Shallal. He's an activist and an artist, and he's one of those people in those public spaces speaking truth to power. Andy, welcome to Borderlines. Oh, indeed, welcome to Nigeria. Vicariously.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours. Indeed, the pleasure is mine. I often say to people, there are several ways to protest. Indeed, activism is shaped in so many different ways. You choose to use art and poetry for yours. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I created a space where art and culture and politics can potentially collide. A place that really provides that sort of comfortable setting so that to allow for people to be able to express their emotions, their feelings, their connections with other human beings, kind of exposing their humanity. And we use food, we use art, we use music, we use poetry, as you said, to be able to open up people's hearts in a different way than, let's say, a panel discussion in a sterile environment would happen.
Indeed. Genocide scholars have, called what we're seeing live every second of our existence for the last 24 months or 22 months, the most documented mass atrocity unfolding in real time. Yet in Washington, the silence from cultural and political institutions is deafening. Why?
Absolutely. I mean, it's we are seeing how the Zionists have really controlled this country's politics and this country's cultural institutions and this country's media. We've seen that over and over again. I mean, like you said, just recently, 86% of an organization that is specifically of people that study the genocide, intellectuals and scholars that study genocide, came up with this conclusion. 86% of them voted that indeed it is a genocide. Many of them were saying that a month after. A genocide doesn't mean wiping out everybody. A genocide just has to have intent. And the intent to wipe out a population is pretty obvious. We've seen the ICC, ICJ, so many other institutions, the Human Rights Watch, international organizations talking about famine, that is forced famine on a whole population. So it's obvious. Yet, even though they may put it on a headline here in the Washington Post or the New York Times, but no sooner than they do that they come up with another study at some university in Israel where a couple of scholars said, well, it's not really that conclusive. They relied on Hamas information, or they relied on XYZ information, and therefore their conclusions are questionable. Again, spreading doubt and keeping people in that sort of in-between space where it's what's obvious to most human beings, there is a genocide, leaves doubt in some who refuse to be able to come on the side of humanity.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk about your space, Busboys and Poets. It's famous for being more than a restaurant. It's a place that's hosted Palestinians, Iraqis, African American artists, and, anti-war veterans. It hosts voices often erased elsewhere. Did you create it as a sanctuary for resistance?
Pretty much, really. I mean, I am an immigrant coming to this country and feeling very much not connected in a real way to this country's culture, this country's political leanings, and so on. And I wanted to create a space where I felt like people who believe that a better world is possible, people who believe that we as human beings are all interconnected with each other, that we don't have that sense of superiority over another group or whatever, that can come together and be able to have these discussions and feel this sanctuary where they can speak their truth and not feel uncomfortable doing that. So this was kind of the intent behind creating Busboys and Poets. And sure enough, there was thousands of people have come through here, many of the most important and iconic figures of our time, people that have been working on social justice and human rights issues from all over the world, as you mentioned, have come through here. And yes, we have an incredible group of followers and clientele that continue to come and look for some of these great events to be able to recharge their batteries sometimes, because we go out there, we fight, and sometimes we feel alone. And when you come back in a space where there's a lot of people around you, suddenly you feel like you're not alone and you can continue fighting.
Indeed, we need spaces like that, especially, like you said, just somewhere to talk, as humans and speak about the pains that we're seeing. You mentioned that you were an immigrant. I'd like to talk to you about immigration, the US, ICE, indeed the UK, and the general growth of anti-immigration, stance across the world, and the growth of the far right. How would you make of that? We see ICE doing things that nobody, I'm not an American. I grew up in England, but I can tell you it would never happen in England. At least I don't think so. Not right now anyway. Unless Farage gets in, who is the far right, reform, who would like to copy Donald Trump. What do you have to say to what we're seeing happening to immigrants right now?
I mean, I hate to tell you, but it is happening in England. I mean, not in the same way, but they're arresting people for just having T-shirts, that say Palestine on them. I mean, it's really pretty ridiculous.
It is.
What is that group that they just
Palestine Action?
Palestine Action. Yes. Anybody walking around with a Palestine Action T-shirt is suddenly whisked off the street and questioned or arrested even. So it's not far from where we are here. Here it's been hyper intensified, really, because of Donald Trump and all of his minions that continue to support him and continue to give him the green light to continue. We oftentimes will think of Donald Trump as the reason behind this, but Donald Trump can't do this alone. He has a whole infrastructure underneath him that helps him to be able to move forward in this direction. He couldn't do it by himself. There's the Senate, there's the Congress, there's the judiciary, but when they all are combined to support him and continue to uplift him and continue to implement his draconian policies, then we have this situation where we're sliding into totalitarianism and, of course, fascism. And Americans aren't used to fascism. They haven't really experienced it in the same way that I think other folks in other parts of the world have, and therefore they don't think of it in terms of a gradual process. They think of it in terms of like they're gonna wake up one day and there'll be signs saying, "Oh, fascism is here." But the reality is, fascism grows when people don't speak up. Fascism grows when people self-censor. Fascism grows when we continue to pretend like they're not going to come for us, that these are just bad people that they're after. But it's really, that's what's happening here. And I find it very disturbing and unfortunate, although people are starting to wake up and starting to recognize that this is a little unusual. Any country that requires their police force to wear masks and not be identified, to me, is a fascist country.
Indeed, it is a fascist country. Now, you said that art is not neutral. In fact, it can either normalize power or challenge it. In the context of Gaza, where images, poems, and songs circulate, and indeed we've seen some really interesting songs written for Gaza. There was one particular one that I heard the other day, which was written, was a play on an old folk song in Ireland and all of that stuff. Do you see art functioning as the front line of this resistance?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind that art is definitely at the front line because hearts and minds don't change with statistics. They don't change with numbers. They change when people are moved, and people are moved only through art and culture. We as human beings crave that, for to make sense of our existence. And so, I was at a conference this last weekend, the People's Conference in Palestine in Detroit, Michigan, and the amount of art, the amount of creativity that was all over the place was really quite spectacular. To see a group of people singing, to see a group of people doing the dabka, the traditional Palestinian dancing of resistance, all of that really added so much more intensity to the event. You had speakers, of course, that were very, very good, but to have that then with a background and an undertone of culture lifts that speech to a much higher level than otherwise would happen. And it opens up people's minds and hearts in a way that is much more willing to accept the ideas and thoughts that are coming at them.
Indeed. Let's talk about Iraq.
Yeah.
You were outspoken. You were an outspoken critic of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and in many ways, Buzz Boys emerged in that crucible. Looking back, and you must have been one. You must have felt like how should I say? Perhaps you didn't have as many people standing in solidarity with you when we go that far back. How did Iraq shape not only your politics but your understanding of how culture, not just protest, can resist empire? And indeed, how did you use that to educate those around you?
Well, back then in 2003, when the Iraq invasion was about to start, I was very involved in the anti-war movement. I've been involved in anti-war movements most of my life. And, for me, war has never been able to solve problems without leaving many more problems behind that continue to set up the stage for the next conflict. So we continue in this cycle of conflict after conflict. And I always believe that a better world is possible, that we as human beings should have evolved to the level where we don't have to be killing each other in order for us to resolve our differences. And so I was very much involved at that time. I did have a couple of restaurants back then because I always saw restaurants as gathering spaces where people come together and kind of talk to their neighbors, their friends, people that they otherwise may not be able to connect with even, and be able to see that they're not alone. That was the whole purpose of it, is that you want to be able to create spaces that make you feel that you're part of a bigger picture. The internet and all of that has its limitations. There's nothing that replaces human contact. So I've always had that and saw the power of food and to bring people together and break bread together and kind of talk about their differences without having to, hurt each other. And so that was kind of the idea that started, where I felt very much, I think 2003, I was feeling very alien in many ways.
Of course.
Then I saw people coming out and demonstrating, and we started connecting with one another in an incredible way. I mean, I think it was very exciting to see the solidarity that was shaping up with people in labor, people in all kinds of walks of life, artists and business people and so on, coming together to create this massive coalition of folks that was really heartening to me. And I thought about, what if we can have a much bigger space that allows these gatherings to take shape and develop and continue to grow. And so that was kind of the impetus behind the idea of thinking about a place like Busboys and Poets that I can open that has a built-in kind of infrastructure to be able to gather large groups of people to be able to break bread together and be able to talk about these things with the intention that this was the place for that purpose. All my other places were restaurants first, and then political, things happened in them. Whereas with this one, it's a political space that has food in it. So it's a very different approach to how I wanted to go about creating Busboys and Poets.
Indeed, and it brings me to a question that we must I must bring to you. It's so if art is dialogue, right? Nollywood is, if you like, the crucible of filmmaking, etc., etc. We've just seen the story of Hind Rajab get a 22 minutes or so standing ovation. You have, several big Nollywood bigwigs who were part of the co-executive producers, etc. Yet the same Nollywood isn't able to actually say, we will stop work. We're actually not going to work anymore. We're going on strike. Or at the very least, do something, right, collectively to stand up for Palestine. Yet you're busy applauding the story of Hind Rajab, a 5-year-old or 6-year-old girl who was killed by Israeli bombardments whilst she was alone in her car, whilst all of her family had been killed around her, whilst she was scared, whilst she was speaking to the ambulance, to the Red Crescent. Yet Hollywood continues to applaud. I don't understand. What do we say? What does that tell us? How do we reconcile that with, art being the dialogue? In fact, now I remember the film, The Thief of Baghdad and all the beautiful films that was done, about the beautiful Iraq back then. But all of a sudden, everything changes. Iraq is now an enemy and all of that stuff. This hypocrisy. Andy, talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, the hypocrisy is quite disturbing, frankly. You have people that speak up. We have members of Congress here that are willing to speak up about things that are happening here. Some of the injustices that are taking place in this country, and they're willing to stand up with such fervor to be able to speak about these things. But yet, they cannot speak about the idea of genocide that is so obvious and right in front of them. It's really quite shocking at the amount of time it has taken for Hollywood and others to come around. I mean, there has always been some great, folks like Susan Sarandon and people like that have been speaking up from, right from the beginning. But you have people like Jane Fonda, for instance, who, for the longest time, she was kind of carrying that banner of activism and art and an artist really speaking truth to power, and yet complete silence on this issue of Gaza. It's quite, it shows you the duplicity. It shows you the lack of character, frankly, that some of these folks have, because it's all about convenience, or it's all about, performative stuff that they know that is not going to cost them anything. You know what I mean? I mean, Hollywood tends to be a liberal, bastion, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to talk about racism. It's easy to talk about, homelessness.
Yeah.
It's easy to talk about, health care for all. It's easy to talk about these things. But God forbid, once you start talking about white supremacy, once you start talking about Zionists, once you start talking about this kind of approach, you end up, everything just kind of freezes, and they're unable to open up their mouths on that issue. It's really quite disturbing, I have to say. And I even had a chance to counter Susan Sarandon. I said, "Thank you so much for what you do, and I'm sure it's been very costly." And she said, "Yes, it has been extremely costly."
I can imagine.
She said, "I'm really upset at the fact that my friends, some of the, she didn't name names, but I know she's talking about people who are actors and, famous people that she interacts with, privately will tell me, I agree with you, but publicly they don't want to come out and talk about it.
But yet,
And that's
Andy, these are people who are not
unfortunate.
hungry. They're not hungry. Jay-Z
They
isn't
don't
hungry.
need it.
Beyonce isn't hungry. Madonna, who just woke up, 5 minutes ago because it was her son's birthday. I could go on. I'm trying to remember their names now, but I think maybe mentally, emotionally, I've deleted them because they're letting us down. I mean, these people are not hungry. George Clooney could speak. Amal Clooney, irrespective of what she's doing, she could speak and be much more forthright. Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, all of them. What's going on? They don't need the money.
I mean, Angela Jolie has been one of the better ones actually speaking up about this issue. But you're right. You're absolutely right. The silence is quite disturbing and really has kind of reinforced the idea that Zionists have such control over all of these institutions. I mean, I'm talking from government to Hollywood. And when I say Zionist, I'm not saying about Jews. This is not about Jews taking over the world.
Absolutely not. It's about Zionism.
And Zionists come in every color and shape. So it's not just, Jewish people, but it's also, supremacists. It's also people who believe in the idea of Christian Zionism. I mean, there's even Muslim Zionism. People who have this understanding that the world should be controlled by a certain group of people who are more worthy than others. And I find it, sad to be able to see that, and sad to be able to see that despite the fact that someone like Beyonce, for example, who's always willing to be at the forefront, quote unquote, of issues, she's breaking the mold when she goes out and does her halftime shows during the Super Bowl and so on. But really what she's doing is very, very safe. What she's doing is not necessarily going to cost her anything.
Of course not.
And when something isn't going to cost you anything, it's really just about performance. It's not really about conviction or a moral stand. And I think, I mean, the Zionist entity has done a tremendously good job in constantly trying to gaslight and really create a narrative that so many have bought into at the beginning. At this point, if you continue to buy the narrative despite all the reality that's unfolding right in front of you, then you are basically choosing not to see the reality, and you're choosing to stay silent and blind to the issue of genocide that's taking place around you. So for me, you've lost your moral stand. You've lost your humanity in so many ways. I do want to give a little bit of a space for those who are willing to come on board, even late in the game, because this is not just about Gaza. Honestly, I mean, Gaza is the compass. Gaza has become a litmus test for me of many other things. When I talk to politicians, my first question is, what is your stand on the genocide in Gaza? And if I have them hesitate, even for a moment, and not be able to say it is the most horrific thing that we've experienced in modern time, where hundreds of journalists are being targeted and killed, hundreds of academics being targeted and killed, hospitals, schools, daycare centers, you name it, food pantries, everything being bombed and destroyed. If you're not able to stand up for that and have the courage to say, this is wrong, how can I trust you on having the courage to do anything else? So for me, it's become kind of a test, really, for anyone that I'm willing to support, certainly running for office or being able to be a leader. How can I count on you on many other issues if I can't count on you on the most fundamental issue, which is human beings, babies being decapitated, I mean, you have to be able to have some understanding of that and be able to speak up against that. If you can't, because you're too afraid, to me, you've lost any sense of connection to me in any way, and certainly even lost part of your humanity.
Indeed. I mean, we have to, you have to ask yourself. So after October 7th, a lot of U.S. cultural institutions cancelled Palestinian artists, and they cut funding, they blacklisted pro-Palestinian voices. Have you kind of felt that pressure? And do you think that might even be, an extension of what we're seeing right now from not that I'm making an excuse to them. I like you said, you want to open up and let's explore what could be leading to this, sort of psychological impotency, emotional vacuum or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen it in our spaces. People have been, unhappy with the stand that I've taken. We've had some folks, send very, very derogatory comments about us. But to me, it's a small price to pay compared to what the price that people in other parts of the world are experiencing, certainly in Gaza and what's happening there. So I feel I can't sleep at night if I cannot stand in solidarity, at the very basic form of solidarity with folks that are being bombarded and killed and their lives destroyed, their families scattered. It makes no sense to me. How could we as human beings allow that to continue to happen? Despite the fact of so many facts that are right in front of us, telling us that this is something horrible. We should do something about it.
Indeed. You can call on 0201-277-0993, 0201-465-7190, or send your WhatsApp if you've got a question for my guest, Andy, on 0809-597-5805. Let's talk about the sort of intersection, the linking of struggles. So at Busby's, Palestinians share stages with Black Lives Matter activists, and we know what happened during the Black Lives Matter, how Palestinians came and said, look, this is how you deal with tear gas, because Israel has been doing this for us forever. You guys, this is what you've got to do. And indeed, I don't know whether you remember, there was a book, a beautiful, stunning coloring book that came out, was it earlier this year, about Malcolm X in Palestine, which, as a result of which Israel closed down the bookshop and all sorts of things. What happens politically when oppressed groups see their fights as connected? Should the West be really, really afraid?
I mean, it's really, solidarity is the key, obviously, to be able to overcome, totalitarianism or supremacy. So solidarity has been, of course, the foundation for movements that have been successful. And I think the Black struggle and the struggle of Gaza has not been as tight as it could be or should be. And I think a lot of times these kinds of, there's been many factors. The administration, the people in power have used the division between these two factions over time. I know that it happened during the Biden administration, where the conversation was around, supporting Black people, giving Black people higher positions, talking a lot about Black Lives Matter. The Biden administration was very, very active in that arena. And I think they became more active during the time when Gaza was actually heating up. And it was obvious because they were seeing this possible connection that was taking place between Black folks here in the United States and people that are supporting Gaza. And so they immediately went into overdrive to provide many more opportunities for Black people so that they can distance themselves from the people working on the Gaza issue. And so you have a lot of people that go around. For instance, even Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about his mother and people that have been. I was talking to Chris Smalls from the Amazon Union, and he was saying he went on the flotilla to Gaza to break the siege, and they were stopped, of course, and he got arrested and brutally attacked by the IDF. But nonetheless, he said, I didn't want to tell my mother that I was going on this boat until it was after the fact, because her conversation was always, this is not your fight. Why are you putting yourself in the middle of this? This is not your fight. And that's what we constantly hear. Sometimes people saying, look, we as Black people living in this country have had to go through a lot of struggles to reach this point. Why are we jeopardizing what we've already gained? And I think what they don't realize is that supremacy is supremacy. That yes, you may rise a certain level, but you're not going to rise anyway. You're not going to go in the front of the line ever if you don't create any kind of solidarity with other people who are equally oppressed. And be sure that the day they come for me, in due time, they will come for you. So you have to be able to work together so that people can support one another when the shit hits the fan. Excuse me. So I think we tend to forget the idea in the moment. It seems very convenient to just hunker down and hang on to what you have. But the reality is, history has shown us over and over again that is not a good strategy. That strategy only leads to further, draconian measures, to further oppression, and pretty soon there won't be anyone to come for you. And that's, I think, the issue that we're dealing with right now. And I think I'm seeing more and more, especially the Black clergy, being able to speak about this issue in their churches, because I think that's the key. And I think part of it is because the Black church, like many other churches, has had a Zionist, foundation. They talk about Jesus, they talk about Israel, they talk about the promised land, they talk about all these things. They even talk about how these people are God's chosen people, and therefore they're more superior than all of us. And so the idea that you're willing to accept that someone who should be equal to you is suddenly deemed more superior, and therefore they need to be uplifted more than anyone else. Seems very strange, but religion has some very odd things in it, and sometimes people follow the oddest part of it.
Indeed, they do. You've brilliant analysis and a brilliant. I mean, I as you were speaking, I am reminded of the elections, the U.S. elections last year. I am reminded that before those elections, we had quite a lot of, or at least it seemed like quite a lot of African Americans coming out to speak for Palestine. Indeed, I had friends of Congo here who said, look, the greatest support we've had, solidarity we've had, are from pro-Palestine supporters. And then you had suddenly Harris becomes the candidate, and it's turning into them and us. So, and
yes,
and because even I have to be honest, let me sort of self-reference, even I got attacked that why you've got to be promoting Harris, and I kept asking, but this is the vice president to Joe Biden, whose government is primarily responsible for the genocide and the lies that we've seen. So I think, do you think, like, even beyond the religion, the African Americans are still kind of struggling, trying to accept that perhaps not our sister? it couldn't have been our sister. And if our sister did it, it's because she had to.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think the Kamala, the Democrats were trying to create a wedge between the pro-Palestine folks and Black folks, and I think having Kamala Harris created a very difficult division there, because a lot of people saw this is the first Black woman. We are still very unevolved in this country when it comes to race. We still have this very specific identity politics that tends to sometimes is not very useful and really kind of disturbing, because we have people like Richie Torres in our government. We have people like Hakeem Jeffries in our government who are just basically just carrying the water for white supremacy and continue to promote it. Whether willingly or unwillingly, they do it very well. And so the Kamala Harris thing became really, really tough. I know that people in the Black community were trying to sort of blind themselves to what's happening in Gaza, saying if we could just squeeze her through this pinhole to get her in, then we can talk about the other stuff. But right now, our focus is to get her to win. And their idea of getting her to win the election was to ignore Gaza, to not talk about that, not realizing that young people are on their phones 24/7. Young people are watching social media and watching the horrors unfold before their eyes and asking themselves, are you kidding? Shouldn't we be talking about this? This seems to be like a very fundamental issue that's happening right now in our lifetime. And why are we silent about this? Why should we sweep this under the carpet and get somebody elected who's not willing to talk about it? What is the purpose of electing this person? And so I think the older, more established folks were all about, respectability politics. It's all about, if we could just work within the system, we'll be able to get through this. And the younger people are saying, damn the system. The system is broken. The system isn't working. Why am I trying to fit into this system that is already horrific, promoting genocide, promoting a horrible world, promoting militarism, promoting death and destruction right before my eyes? I'm not stupid. I'm not blind. But, and you're trying to convince me that it's okay for me to just be silent for however amount of time so that you can get somebody through this pinhole? No, thank you. So I think Black young people, white young people, brown young people, all kind of checked out and said, no, we don't want to be part of this. And I think that's really where the divide is happening right now. It's between the new generation who's the new generation who sees the world very differently, and the old generation who is like beholden to that old paradigm of a world that is unsustainable. And they see that the world is unsustainable.
Thank you. Right, I'm coming to your calls. You can call 0201 2770993, 0201 4657190. Hello.
Yeah, thank you. Number one, the intellectuals that sat on genocide this week, 80% of them agreed there was genocide. Of what help would that be in the case of any legal proceeding, proper legal proceeding, if it eventually happens?
But he's not a lawyer, and he's an artist. But I'll ask him anyway.
Okay. Let me go to his profession now. As a creative person, is he not afraid of himself? Looking at what happened with the Charlie Hebdo people, cartoonists in France about 2015, 2016, is it not because you have extremists everywhere, whether in religion or in politics? Then the second question is the judgment on Harvard University concerning the holding of their subvention by Donald Trump. Does he think more universities are going to stand up against what Donald Trump is doing? They're inciting because of anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Titi Lokbe is asked. Don't worry, I've written them down. Let me answer this call, and I'll come back to you and stay put. Hello.
Hello, good evening, madam.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, I'm Madam Lucky. I'm calling from the village.
Go ahead.
I want you to ask your guest that since the death of Arafat, till the time this issue of September, something that triggered this crisis come on board. Ask your guest that if Israel have taken the peace process after the death of Arafat seriously and be able to find the solution and have a two-state solution, don't you think that Israel will have averted this embarrassment that is currently having, for him to be having embarrassment from France and even his key allies?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've got 3 questions there. Okay, I've got 3 questions there. Bear with me. Right, okay. Right. The first one was about, are you not afraid, being a creative, of any kind of backlash? The second one is, what are your thoughts on Harvard and the capitulation, and do you think other universities will capitulate? And the last question was, could Israel have avoided what my caller called, quote unquote, this current embarrassment, where it's continuing, Western countries are isolating themselves or isolating Israel away from themselves? I'm going to say the lines are going crazy now. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to answer all those 3 questions.
Okay. So I am not afraid, because I feel as an artist, art is always dangerous. Artists have been killed, they've been tortured, they've been detained, they've been arrested. So art is always dangerous. Whenever you are an artist, you take that risk, and that risk is unnegotiable. I mean, for me, art is my life, and I cannot, be able to just make it into some wishy-washy nonsense. So I think that's important for me to continue to speak up. Is what keeps me alive, what keeps me going. I can't live with myself if I don't. I think the idea of the schools, Harvard and Columbia and other schools that have capitulated, it's really a horrible, horrible thing for higher learning and academics. I think the United States has always been a place where people come here for higher learning, and really kind of, there were some of the top universities in the world, and now they have been tainted. And it's ironic because they're using anti-Semitism as a bludgeon to be able to take away funding for cancer research, funding for Alzheimer's, funding for child, obesity. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that there's a group of Jewish students who feel uncomfortable is causing this administration to yank away all these millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars from these universities that were doing research on cancer. Yeah. I don't understand the connection, but it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Indeed. I mean, they are trying to, it's like, the thing about white supremacy, it is, and supremacy in general, it knows no bounds. It's like back in the old days when they desegregated pools, swimming pools in the United States, rather than saying, let's work with this and make it happen, white communities put concrete and covered up the pools so their children couldn't even play. They'd rather have that than be able to share the bounty that this country has. So similarly, what's happening is if you cannot have, a completely pro-Zionist approach to what's happening, then therefore we're going to take away research on cancer. It's like, makes no sense whatsoever. Absolutely. And I think it's really quite disturbing about what happened in that situation. And of course, Israel is becoming more and more isolated as more and more countries, even Western countries, are starting to say, we're going to recognize Palestine as a state. And, I don't know where this is going to lead, but it's will they even Israel. Do it, Andy? In fact, will they actually do it? Because it's next week. Will they do it? Israelis are afraid to travel now because they're getting harassed and arrested wherever they go. So it's a different world. Thank you very much. Hello. Turn off the radio, please. Yes, turn off your radio. Yes, good evening.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Godman, yeah, please.
Go ahead, Godman.
I want to ask him because I feel before October 7, women have been dehumanized in the Arab nations, Afghanistan, and all those other nations, and they've been neglected. Now we're talking about protesting for what's going on in Gaza. Women till now are still dehumanized in those Arab nations.
Where
What
did
are
you
we
get
doing
that?
for-
Hold on. We're talking about Gaza because you have to again.
I'm listening because
Permit me to correct you. They're not
I'm not asking
homogeneous.
what you have done.
No. I'm
That's
just
that. That's my
saying
question.
they're not homogeneous. So what is your question? Is your question for Gaza
Yeah, my
about
question is,
Gaza
what
or
have you done
Afghanistan?
That with his artwork, because an advocate he protests on things like that. So what has he done? I want to know if he has done anything in regards to that, and we need to do more.
Okay, great question. Thank you. Right. So what Godman is saying, and I think I understand him now, is that across the Middle East, and indeed beyond, he's talking about Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, etc. Although I said to him they're not homogenous, he's saying women's rights have always been secondary rather than primary, at least certainly not equal. What have you done? Is that the kind of activism that you work on?
On women's rights issues?
Yes, in the region.
Yes. Of course. It's, oftentimes these kinds of things are used to open up the opportunities for an attack or for an occupation and so on. As you see, like places like Saudi Arabia, for instance, where women just recently got the right to drive, they still can't travel without their husband's approval, all kinds of oppression that happens there. Very few of them make it up in government, but we still have very strong allyship with Saudi Arabia. Whereas, in Iran, for instance, where the women may be required to wear hijab, suddenly we talk about the oppression of women. So it's very convenient for us to sort of bring up these issues when it's serving our interests or the interests of the militarism that wants to intervene in these countries. So I think it's sometimes I feel like it's just false kind of focus on issues that may not be at the forefront of what needs to be talked about. What I say is, for a lot of these places, the most important thing is not to isolate them. For example, what's happened in Iran, the sanctions and the isolation and the blockade on Iran only makes their government more strict and more conservative and more willing to crack down. The more you open up a society, the more opportunities there are for people to travel, learn from each other, and therefore let the people of that country make their decision of what needs to happen. My responsibility is to this country. I am an American now. So my responsibility is to the United States. And what I look for is issues here. I am less concerned about human rights in other parts of the world, although it's important, and I agree with that. But I think a lot of the issues, a lot of the problems that happen throughout the world are instigated and initiated by our policies in this country. This country looms very large across the globe. We have military bases in almost every single country on earth. We are in control of so much. We are in control of money. The dollar runs everything. The amount of influence that we have. We're seeing it with Gaza, for God's sake. The minute a country speaks up for Gaza, they get like
tariffs.
I'm looking at what's happening in South Africa. In South Africa. It's horrific. They brought up this case, and now South Africa is having to go through all kinds of hassles economically and otherwise because of the United States. So the United States power is immense. So I don't want to speak about a certain country or a certain region and their human rights issues. I want to speak about the effect that this country has on the entire world and the human rights in the entire world. And one of the problems we have is we're not consistent. We don't carry this message across in a consistent way. And therefore, it comes across as being opportunistic and not really to the interest of the people in that region, but mostly to the interest of the military, of the capitalists, of the people that run this country.
Thank you. Final question for you. You can't call anymore. We don't have time, and I've only got a minute and a half with my guest. I know you're all trying to get through. Right. So, Andy, I've got to ask you. You often say that Boss Boys is about imagining the world we want, not just resisting the one we have. What does that future look like for you, and how can culture help us for not just survive empire, but to build beyond empire? I'm going to give you a minute. They're talking in my ears already.
Well, yeah. I have to understand that each one of us has a role to play, that one of us isn't going to make the change that needs to happen. Each one of us creates opportunities for others to be able to fit in, and therefore we create this tapestry across our world that makes it a better place. So I will continue to do what I do. I am a person of culture. I'm an artist. I feed people. I provide a space that is a sanctuary for people that believe a better world is possible. And through those connections, you can build all kinds of coalitions and create solidarity that will make this world far better than it is today.
I recently, let me just sneak this in. I recently watched a documentary, the Emmy Award-winning documentary by Dia Khan about white supremacy when she came to the United States. So I ended up following her, and she says, there's a quote that I like: our values only matter when we're willing to extend them to people we don't like.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And that's art. That's what art does. Constantly continues to engage, educate, and dialogue without excluding anybody. And that's why people like you matter all the time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
The pleasure's all ours. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, brother. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.